I will be with you in covenant faithfulness. When you hear God say, I will be with you, it's, I will be with you in covenant faithfulness. And this is what his name means. So it's not about pronunciation of certain syllables and certain consonants or vowels. It's about a promise that God has made to his people. I'm not asking you to learn grammar. I'm not asking you to learn how to pronounce my name, because you might get that wrong. But what I am wanting you to know is, I will be with you. I will be covenantally faithful to you. Okay? This is the key. So when we hear Yod He Vav He, when we see this tetra, four, grammaton, 4 letters, it's short form of I will be with you. Now watch how the Gospel of Matthew, go with me to Matthew chapter 1. Watch how the writer, this Gospel writer, Matthew, watch how he picks up on this. Matthew chapter 1, and we're going to pick up the reading in verse 23. Matthew chapter 1, and look at verse 23. Actually, I'll just start with verse 22. So this was all done, that it might be fulfilled, which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, I just read you Isaiah 7:14. Behold, a virgin shall be with child and bear a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel, which is translated God with us. They just quote Isaiah 7:14, so they believe Isaiah. So Matthew believes that Isaiah 7:14 is referring to this child. Notice that it's at the front here, right at the beginning of the book. Now watch how it's bookended. Go with me to Matthew chapter 28. Matthew chapter 28 and verse 20. As Yeshua is leaving this earth, listen to what he says. He says, teaching them to, verse 20, teaching them to observe all things that I have commanded you, and I am with you always, even to the end of the age. He ends the book with this, and I am with you. So Matthew bookends this concept of I am with you. This go to Isaiah chapter 7, verse 14. He'll be called Emmanuel, God with us, and then he ends, the very ending is, and lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. So Matthew bookends and wants us to understand that Yeshua is this Emmanuel. He starts the book off this way, and he ends the book this way. He envelops the book with this concept that this is God with us. Very, very Semitic way of arguing to us. Okay? So that if you understand, Matthew is telegraphing, hey, look, you've heard all this with us language, this with you language. If you've read the Hebrew Scriptures with any kind of eyes open, you have to close your eyes to not see that how many times I've been saying to you, I'll be with you. I just listed a number of texts. Joshua 1, Genesis 26, Judges 6, 1 Samuel 10, Jeremiah 1:8, Jeremiah 30, Isaiah 7. There's 7 right there, and I didn't go through getting even close to all of them. So anybody that's read the Scriptures with their eyes open has heard this with us language. And especially at key points. Joshua chapter 1, you've heard Moses just died. Hey, Joshua, I'll be with you. Just as I was with Moses, I'll be with you. And he's not saying I'll be with you in the sense of physical presence, although there's an aspect of that, but it's really I'll be covenantally faithful to what I have said I will do to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Because if you go back and look at ancient Near Eastern covenants, in ancient Near Eastern covenants, 2 kings would talk to each other, and you would hear them say to each other, if you have need of me, I will be with you. This is covenantal language as it's used in the ancient Near East. So it's not talking about physical proximity, it's talking about covenantal faithfulness. God always being covenantally faithful. Now watch what happens. Yeah.
Well, all those examples, he was talking to the Jewish people.
Absolutely. Absolutely, he's talking with them. So that begs the question, we'll talk about that in a moment, but how do we get in? How do Gentiles get in? They have to come in through the covenant. Because God is covenantally faithful to Israel. He's using them as the means, the physical means by which he will draw all the nations to himself. Now, it wasn't about Israel, it's about him, but he's using Israel to get to him and to get the peoples to him. It doesn't begin and end with Israel. He uses them, absolutely. And they are to be his people, and we are to respect them. But we don't have to worship them. We worship him. Now I want to show you something. Go with me to Jeremiah chapter 1. For those of you that have the Hebrew text, this will be helpful, but if not, I'll want to show you something. So go to Jeremiah chapter 1. Here's how we know it's not about language, or about consonants and vowels. Which this movement for a long time was trying to say, well, the name of the Lord, and it's all about consonants and vowels. Well, here's the problem with that. I'm going to read you first 3 verses of Jeremiah 1. It says this: the words of Jeremiah, son of Hilkiah, the priest who were in Anathoth in the land of Benjamin, to whom the word of the Lord came in the days of Josiah the son of Ammon, king of Judah, in the 13th year of his reign. It came also in the days of Jehoiakim, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, until the end of the 11th year of Zedekiah, the son of Josiah, king of Judah, until the carrying away of Jerusalem captive in the 5th month. My point of reading this is this: if you look at the name Jeremiah, it's Yirmiyahu. So at the end it's Yahoo. Okay, so that's if it's at the end. So it's what we call adding. It's a theophoric name. It's where you add the name that you want to add the tetragrammaton, the 4 letters, as much as you can to a particular name. You want to either add it to the beginning of a name or to the end of a name. So Yirmiyahu, we say Jeremiah, but it's Yirmiyahu. Now what's interesting is, when you continue reading, it says, which was in the word, which the Lord came to him in the days of Yoshiyahu, Josiah. Yoshiyahu, okay. Yahu again at the end of a name. Ben Ammon, son of Ammon, king of Judah, okay, in the 11th year of his reign. Verse 3, and it was in the days of Jehoiakim. Now, at the front here, it's Yeho. Yod-Hey, Vav. So, completely different. It's a little bit different. Okay, and if you look and keep going, Jehoiakim again, and then Ben Yehoshiyahu, king of. Okay, so here you can see at the front it's Yeho, at the end it's Yahu. So it's interesting. Different pronunciations for where the tetragrammaton is put on a name. This is how we know that it's not about the pronunciation, because depending on where you put it in a word, it's going to have to change pronunciation. You can't have it the same pronunciation. You can have the same letters, but you're going to have some different vowels if you put it on the front versus if you put it on the end. So if he was making it about how you sound his name out, with different people, it's going to sound different.
So I know this is kind of contrary to the point that you're making right now, but that kind of sounds like it would then be pronounced Yehovahu.
No.
No?
There's never any time that it's ever pronounced that way. Ever.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's just, we never have any instance of that pronunciation. That's another thing that was fascinating was, if you're going to use theophoric names, then you have to have at least one name where that happens. We have none where that happens.
Interesting.
I can take you all through all the theophoric names we have in the Bible where they put. Now, and here's what's interesting. So what we do at the end, we go hallelujah, imperative, hallelujah, Yah. Yod and a kametz and a he. If we're doing an imperative, it's following an imperative. Shortened form, hallelujah. Okay? If I put it on the front, Yeho, Natan. If I put it on the end, Yahu, Yeshiyahu. So just my point is this. It was never about consonants and vowels. It was always about who is this one. His name talks about his personhood, his character, his presence. It never talked about how we pronounce it. It was never about that, but we've made it about that in this movement. So I'm just trying to bring a little corrective to that.
And therein is why I believe he knows who we're talking about if somebody calls him Jesus.
Correct. So I don't think God gets upset if somebody says Jesus. While I know that's not his name, I don't think he's up there going, oh my, what am I going to do? I'm not going to talk to them. I'm not going to listen to them. I think we have to give a little bit of grace and realize, you know what? Most of us knew him as Jesus before we ever knew him as anything else. And And you know what? He still loved us, he still cared for us, and he was okay. He's big enough that he's not worried about the pronunciation. Now, we should try to educate to say, his name is Yeshua, because in Matthew 1:23 it says, you shall call his name Yeshua, for he will save. And so the word Yeshua and salvation or deliverance have a connection. And so we want to come to the Semitic understanding of that as much as possible. That's where we should come to. But give grace to those who don't know. Yeah.
After our conversation a couple weeks ago, I went and actually looked at where Jesus comes from. And long story short, translated to Greek, and then through the Greek spelling they add the S because you can't have a male's name without a consonant in the end. That's where the extra S comes from. And then when they brought it back to people after the Gothic, or after the Greek was taken out, it got, through layman terms, it got translated into Jesus.
Yes.
In Greek, it's Iosus.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
I just wanted to add a little anecdote. In elementary school, I had a best friend of mine. His mother was from Finland, and they named him Mika, which is a Finnish name. But the translation of that is Michael. So most everybody knew him as Michael. But we were best friends, so I called him Mika. And that's how I generally relate this Jesus versus Yeshua thing. Not to say that we're better than other people because we know him better, quote unquote. But it's kind of nice to know his real name.
But here's the thing, and you know this too.
Yeah.
I agree that's a good thing. But here's the thing, somebody can know your name but not know you.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you could have people that you work with who know your name. They know how to pronounce it perfectly. And they don't know anything about you.
Right.
You could work beside them for years and they have no idea who you are or what you really believe or what you think, unless you talk to them. But I mean, you can be around, and I go all places all the time where people know my name. They don't know anything about me. They know nothing about me. Just because they know my name doesn't mean they know. So it's about the character of God and the presence of God. Really knowing who he is his name is about his presence and what he has done. Yeah.
They didn't call him Jesus until sometime, maybe around 1541, they claim.
Yeah, it comes in very late. Absolutely. All right, go with me to Leviticus chapter 12. Leviticus chapter 12. By the way, the reason I had us read the portion from Luke 2 is oftentimes at Christmas time we go through these narratives of Matthew and Luke that have the birth narratives, and I think these verses either they get skipped over or they get lost. So in a moment I'm going to go back and focus on them and show you why I think they're huge. But look at Leviticus chapter 12. It says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, If a woman has conceived and born a male child, then she shall be unclean 7 days, as in the days of her customary impurity she shall be unclean. Okay. And on the 8th day after the flesh of his foreskin shall be circumcised. She shall then continue in the blood of her purification 33 days. She shall not touch any hallowed thing, nor come into the sanctuary. So this is the real issue. The real issue is, make sure she doesn't come into the sanctuary. So you have 7, 8 days circumcised, and 33 for a total of 40. Now here's the kicker. So I'm going to read this next portion, and I'm going to tell you, after further review, I still don't have a clue why there's a disparity. Although I have an idea that I have not been able to verify to my satisfaction. I have a theory. But what I'm telling you is this. I have read commentary after commentary where they're looking at this text and they're trying to figure out, why do we have the disparity in numbers that we do? And some of them will just skip over that portion and say, well, we don't even want to talk about why there's a disparity. Others will talk about it and then give you an idea that they have, and you go, I don't even see how that works. I've heard one idea that I think could work, but I haven't been able to find a verification for it in the text, or even outside the text. And so until I can do that, I'm skittish about. Okay, here's what happens. Look at verse 5. But if she bears a female child, then she shall be unclean 2 weeks, as in her customary impurity, and she shall continue in the blood of her purification 66 days. So it doubles to 80. 7 and 33, 40, then 14 and 66. And you're going, okay, so why is it doubled for a female? And believe me, I have heard many, many, many theories. One I want to dispense with that I don't think works is that God is somehow misogynistic and doesn't like women. And so, you know, the girls are somehow more impure than, I don't buy that.
Ooh, I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember when I gave birth to my daughter, and then when I gave birth to my two sons, I actually felt like I bounced back better with the boys than I did with the girls, than with my girl. You know, maybe girls are a little harder on the mom.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, everyone would be different. Yeah.
Probably.
I was gonna say, I think what we mentioned before that seems very logical is that, well, when you have a girl, you know, she has her own womanhood, she's gonna have her own time of bleeding, that there's a difference in there, and so, you know, the mother is caring for that.
Right, that's the theory that I've worked with in the past, and that's the only one, so let me restate that since women are able to bear children, and since women have monthly cycles in which they bleed, that the mother is carrying the impurity for the first cycle of the girl. Although I've not been able to verify that or been able to nail that down to my satisfaction. It's plausible, and it may be possible. Again, I'm not comfortable until I can. And again, I'm looking, man. I've been looking to try to find something definitive in the text that will aim us that direction. But yeah, go ahead.
The other thought that popped in my head that I hadn't really thought about before, and I don't know exactly how it fit in, but it's like just came in my head a moment ago, is, you know, after the 8 days, the boy is circumcised.
Correct.
And girls don't have any type of circumcision, so maybe there's something within that is a longer period because they have a physical thing to, you know, being
Right.
clean and the covenant and things with that. Maybe it ties back to something with, you know, Adam and Eve and woman's sin. I don't know. You know, maybe
You know what?
any of those things.
I like the
could
way
be
you're thinking. I mean, there's some good thinking going on there. So let's continue that because I'm trying to figure this out too because I think there's something there.
Yeah.
And it's one of those questions when I get to the world to come, I'm gonna go, Leviticus 12, what was up with that? Why the disparity? Henry, go ahead.
Why would we need a reason? God said, do it.
I agree. But you know what though? I think this though. No, I think we're gonna, you should do it, absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do think that God puts conundrums in the text to force us to dig deeper. Maybe we never come to a reason. And I've always argued that even if we should do what God asks us to do, even if we don't have a reason. Absolutely. But, I think there's times where we have to search out and say, okay, God, why do you want us, there was something here. Why the difference?
Well,
And at least search. Because I think it does push us to search. And maybe there's, maybe when we get to the world to come, the answer is like, well, duh. Didn't you see this? Who knows? All right, go ahead.
Well, I know with our Chinese grandmother and our Cambodian children, I'm going to ask them both if there's a difference with practices with girls and boys. They have certain foods they eat, certain things they do, how long they stay in bed, how long they stay in the house. So this is a custom for health. But I'm going to ask them, is there a difference between if you have a girl?
Sure, this could be a cultural thing. I don't know. Let me finish this thought, and Mary, I'll come back to you. I'm coming right back to you. Hold on one thing. Let me finish two thoughts. I want to note two things. First of all, notice that it says, verse 6, when her days of her purification are fulfilled, whether for a son or daughter, she shall bring to the priest a lamb of the first year as a burnt offering, and a young pigeon or a turtle dove as some of your translations will translate a sin offering. I want to argue that it should not be translated sin offering, but it should be translated, the katat should be translated purification offering. There has been no sin. In other words, having a child is not a sin. However, you need purification in order to go back into the tabernacle. So that's the first thing. And then notice this. Then he shall offer it before the Lord and make atonement for her, and she shall be clean from the flow of her blood. This is the law for her who has born a male or a female. Now look at this. And if she is not able to bring a lamb, then she may bring 2 turtle doves or 2 young pigeons, one as a burnt offering and the other as a purification offering. Okay? Now, here's the kicker for this. Oftentimes, one of the arguments or one of the charges leveled at the Torah is that it's just hard and fast and there's no mercy. And here's an example amongst many others where, depending on your economic status, you can bring a lesser value offering to the Lord in order to bring reparation and to bring everything back into balance. And again, it's because it's a purification. But he gives them a chance to bring something of lesser value, which is merciful, because if you were not of the economic status in which you could bring the animals required, then you'd be in trouble. Or at least be prohibited. Mary, go ahead.
It's not a mystery of 66 days, 33 and 33. First of all, 33 is physiology of childbirth. So after childbirth, it takes about 30 days for everything to settle down. And then you may or may not have another cycle. It's just a protection to prevent the woman who may be having some, abnormalities or just irregularities after childbirth, physiologically getting back on track.
Or it's for what you put in the Bible. I'm just kidding.
Okay. And then maybe.
Physiology of circumcision, 8 days is when the clotting factor kicks in, right in the head,
Sure.
produced by the liver.
Sure. So I mean, there's always physiology to it at some level, but and beyond that, I don't know.
There's a spiritual level.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Is it not that these are only current earthly ordinances, because in the eternal kingdom there will be neither male nor female?
What?
Aren't these only earthly ordinances current? Because in the eternal kingdom there will be neither male nor female. Is that what Yeshua told us?
I'm not sure I would hold to that, but there wouldn't be still would be some division of male and female. What will we be? What text are you?
When the kingdom of Yeshua, he spoke of the woman that had multiple husbands.
Yes.
Okay. When the kingdom will come, who will be your husband? And he said, in the kingdom will come, there will be neither male nor female.
No, he says there will be no marriage. He didn't say no male or female. He says there will be no giving or taking in marriage. Okay. No. Okay, so let's go back with me now to Matthew chapter 2. Take your text and go with me to Matthew chapter 2. Let's watch this. I want to walk you through Matthew chapter 2, and let's look at the connections to the Torah. I'll give you the references. It says this in verse 21, Matthew chapter 2, and when 8 days were completed for the circumcision of the child, his name was called Yeshua, the name given by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. So notice he's circumcised on the 8th day. But the purpose of the 8th day in the Hebrew Scriptures is to speak of the world to come. There's the cycles of 7 everywhere. And by the way, Matthew has cycles of 7 everywhere. We'll talk about that later. 7 is a huge number in the Bible. But for Matthew it's also, and for the other biblical writers as well. But 7 is key because you have 7 for wholeness, and then 8 speaks of and beyond. So it's 7, wholeness, completion, and then 8 says, it's like eternity and beyond, okay? What's beyond eternity? Okay, it's just a way of saying ad infinitum, ad nauseum, okay? It's like, keep going. So 8 is like this, signifies the eternal, okay? So when 8 days were completed for the circumcision of the child, his name was called, okay, that's verse 40. So notice he's circumcised on the 8th day. Then notice verse 22. Now when the days of her purification, according to the law of Moses, were completed, they brought him to Jerusalem to present him to the Lord, as it is written in the Torah of the Lord, every male who opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord. That goes to, look at Exodus 13, 11 to 16, Numbers 3, 38 to 51, and Exodus 13, 2. Okay? Exodus 13, 11 to 16, Numbers 3, 38 to 51, and Exodus 13, 2. So it says, notice now when the days for purification according to the Torah of Moses were completed. So it'll be 40 days. So she's following, she's looking, he's circumcised on the 8th day, then she completes the purification, and notice what she brings. It says, every male who opens the womb shall be called holy to the Lord, and to offer a sacrifice according to what is said in the Torah of the Lord, a pair of turtle doves and 2 young pigeons, which tells me that Yosef and Miriam were on the lower economic scale. She brings the lower level of sacrifice. Okay? So it seems that they were probably not on the upper echelon of wealth, based on the offering she brings. Okay? So she's going to bring this purification offering. But notice she's doing it, they're doing it according to the Torah of the Lord. And then look what happens, verse 25. So we go through this. There was in Jerusalem a man whose name was Simeon, who was just and devout. You read all through this. There's Anna, who's in the temple there. Simeon and Anna, fascinating people who are devoted to the temple. And then look at verse 39. So when they had performed all things according to the Torah of the Lord, they returned to the Galil. Now, what's also required is that, and it's mentioned in the text that I gave you, is that you redeem the firstborn with 5 silver shekels. So that's in the text that I gave you in the earlier text. So they have to do 3 things. You have to circumcise a child on the 8th day. You have to offer the sacrifice of purification. And you have to pay the 5 shekels, silver shekels, for, and by the way, shekel there wasn't a monetary amount per se, it was a weight. Early on, shekels refers to weight. The New Israeli shekel is a denomination. But shekelim in the biblical text is a weight. So you have to bring 5 shekels of silver for the redemption. You have to give that to the temple for the redemption of the firstborn. It's called Pidyon Haben, the redemption of the son. So they redeem this boy. My point is this, that his parents were absolutely meticulous in their observance of Torah. And that gets lost when people tell the narrative of the birth of Yeshua, Messiah.
Yeah.
They don't even talk about this. Well, he was born, he dropped out of heaven, and he came to save us from our sins. And it gets lost that, well, his parents were very, very, very strict in their observance. Circumcising him on the 8th day, watching for the issues of purification, offering the offerings, redemption of the firstborn, and then we know, if you continue reading, it says in verse 41, his parents went to Jerusalem every year at the feast of Passover. So these are very, very observant people, the family he's born into. I would argue that Messiah has to, because the Messiah is going to be living Torah, he has to be born into a family that is living Torah. He can't be born into a family who is, well, we don't care about the festivals, who cares about that circumcision stuff, who cares about the temple. They're not lax in any way whatsoever. This is a family that is devout in their observance. And as you walk through this, you can see they're checking off all the boxes. So it tells me that this is the kind of family, you see this family, you're going, this is a very, very devout family. Now notice what's said about it at the very end. It says, and Yeshua increased in wisdom and in knowledge, wisdom and stature, and in favor with God and man. Anybody know where that's a quote from? 1 Samuel? Samuel, it's said of Samuel somewhat. Go with me to Proverbs. By the way, Luke is, in my estimation, as you look at Luke, he doesn't like to tell you that he's quoting from the Hebrew Scripture or alluding to it. He doesn't oftentimes emphasize it by any type of telegraphing. He just kind of says, comes off with some words, and you're supposed to know where he's coming from. Let me get to Proverbs. Hold on just a second.
He's doing that because he assumes you know where it's coming from, right?
Of course.
Yeah. Not because he's trying to be mystical.
Not because he's trying to be mystical, but just because. Okay, look at Proverbs chapter 3. in verse 4, it says this. Let not mercy, I'm going to go back to verse 3. Let not mercy and truth forsake you. Bind them about your neck, write them on the tablet of your heart, and so find favor and high esteem in the sight of God and man. Now look what it says. Look how it starts though. My son, do not forget my Torah, but let your heart keep my commands. For length of days and long life and peace shall they add to you. And then it says this of him, and Yeshua increased in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. Let me suggest to you that Yeshua is, based on Luke's testimony, he knows and he's going to live out and walk in extreme fashion obedience to the Torah. And that's telegraphed by this quote from Proverbs 3, chapter 4. Anybody reading Luke chapter 2 knows two things. Number one, well, three things we can, I think, safely say. Number one, his parents were meticulous observers of Torah. Number two, that Simeon and Anna see him as fulfilling prophecy related to the coming of Messiah. And number three, that Yeshua himself, based on this text from Proverbs 3, that he's increasing in his knowledge and obedience to Torah. So if you want to be a follower of this man, you have to increase in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and man. That is, you have to also increase your knowledge of and your obedience to the Torah, not for the purposes of your redemption. Not for redemption, it's for sanctification, it's for becoming like the one you follow. And notice how this is all laid out where they keep saying, and they did this according to the Torah. And I think it's important to go back and remember what we said about Matthew. Matthew wants you to see that where we talked about all this Emmanuel, God with us, Matthew's saying, I'm going to quote you Isaiah 7:14, God with us, so that you understand who this one is. This is God with us. And then Yeshua himself says at the very end, and lo, I am with you always. That's Yahweh language. He's quoting Yahweh. He's saying, look, I'm with you. Who kept telling everybody he was with them? Yahweh did. He kept saying, I'm with you. I'm with you. And that means this. I'm covenantly faithful to everything I've said I will do for you. This is because of who I am. I am Yahweh on the ground. If you understand who I am. So to reject Yeshua is to reject Yahweh. To reject Yahweh is to reject Yeshua. You can't have it. They're one and the same. They're two sides of the same coin. We want to split them all the time. But at the end of the day, they're connected. And the people of God, look at the family. When God sought to put Yeshua into a family, look at who he put him in, the family he put him into. The family he put him into was a family that was very, very Torah observant. Let me suggest to you that Yeshua is best at home in a family that's following Torah. That's where he's most at home. Because he himself is living Torah. He himself grew in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man. And you read the verses before that, and that's talking about obedience to God's commands. So let me suggest to us that God is most at home when we are most obedient to his commands. If we want him to live in us, then he finds the best place in us when we ourselves are living out his commands. Again, not to become something, but because we are something. All right.
Brent?
Yes.
One comment. In the Old Testament, when the Jews love and follow the commands, God addressed them as not equal. When they didn't, he didn't address them as someone else's.
True. Very true.
Someone else's.
Yes.
What I was trying to make a statement about was that in a lot of the English translations, it says leprosy, leprosy, leprosy.
Oh, yeah, good.
Including with cloth. It's not leprosy in the cloth, it is mold or mildew in
Correct.
the cloth.
Right.
Yeah, so,
Mold or mildew in a house.
right. So
And
what we have
most
is,
of the things
right.
defined as leprosy in chapter 13 are actually just plain skin diseases.
Right.
Correct.
And the only thing that comes close to that is a description of an infectious skin disease.
Yeah, it's the Hebrew word, in Greek it's lepra, so that got us to this word leprosy. However, in Hebrew it's zara'at, which is skin disorders. It's a wide range of skin disorders. And if you look at them, they kept you out of the temple, okay? That's why the priests have to determine. It's fascinating because when Yeshua heals lepers, those with zara'at in the Hebrew scripture, in the apostolic scripture, he says, go show yourself to the priest. He doesn't abandon the temple or the priesthood. He says, go show yourself to the priest and do what Moses commanded. Right. He doesn't say, oh, well, you know, I'm Jesus, I'm Yeshua, so I healed you, it's all good. Yeah. He says, no, you still need to go do the reparations and show yourself to the priest. They need to be the ones to determine, to declare you clean and to tell you to go do the immersions.
It said 3 different types. It said chronic, it said
sure.
leukoderma, and then it said leprosy.
So what the priest is supposed to do is to look at, the priest is the one who determines, is this something that is prohibiting you from going into the temple? Because the priests are the guardians to the entrance to the temple. So if you have something that they think has moved in that direction, they're to look at the discoloration of the skin. Is it spreading? They look at all these different things, and they determine by coloration and by spread and by what's inside the sore. They have all these criteria. As you can see, it's very detailed. And they can put you in quarantine. They can say, okay, well, you know what we're doing? We're going to quarantine you for 7 days, and I'll come back and we'll look at it.
It's a medical diagnostic, basically.
Yeah, it's very medical, and it's diagnostics. Then they can look at it and say, declare you unclean, in which case you need to stay away from the temple, or they can declare you clean, in which case you do a ritual immersion and you come into the presence. You come back in. So zara'at is not what we call modern Hansen's disease, which is modern Hansen's is a neurological disorder. It has nothing to do with the skin disorders that we're talking about in the text. With Hansen's, what happens is you lose sensation in parts of your body to the point that you can't even feel other parts of your body. That's different than what's going on here. And why? Why zara'at? Because zara'at, here's the key. It was close enough it was like death was encroaching. Your body was decaying, and so it looks like death.
It is because it's necrotizing.
Yes, the skin is necrotizing, so it's like, okay, we got encroaching death. And until the death stops encroaching, you can't come in. It's all about life and death. Now, here's the other. So you have to wait a certain amount of time, do the immersions. That's all part and parcel of this whole. So modern Hansen's is not leprosy. And here's what's interesting. We only have 3 individuals that are ever healed of zara'at. We have Moses is able to put his hand in. He comes out with zara'at. He puts it back in. It's healed instantaneously. Then you have Naaman from Syria, who is healed of zara'at. Miraculously, dipped 7 times in the Jordan. And then Miriam, Numbers chapter 12. Miriam also miraculous because if her brother Moshe does not pray for her, she won't be healed. So Moses intercedes for Miriam and goes to God on behalf of Miriam, and God says, okay, on your behalf, Moses, I'll heal her.
Doesn't he heal?
It's just she's now that's the only 3 that you ever have that are ever healed of. So the point is that anybody that can heal zara'at can reverse the effects of death. You're reversing the effects of death.
Didn't he heal a bunch of lepers and tell them to go, like 7 of them or something like that?
That's Yeshua. Yeah, Yeshua heals 10 lepers.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was off by 3.
That's good. Yeah.
Daniel stayed in Babylon because he was a eunuch and he knew he could not go into the temple upon returning to Israel. So those that I have been on several islands where what we call leprosy was prevalent, and there were people that had no freedom of speech. So they were not whole.
Correct.
So if you were in that condition, you would never be able to go into the temple.
Correct. But the modern Hansen's, the reason why you destroy yourself is because if you have no nerve endings, you have no nerve receptors sending pain signals to your brain telling you, you shouldn't do that.
So you smash
You can
foot?
smash your fingers in a door. Imagine if you could smash your fingers in a door, now that your fingers would break, but you never felt anything. It didn't register any kind of neurosensors in your brain to go, ooh, that really hurts. So they can put their hand on a burner, and there's no neuroreceptors in their hand to go, hey, take your hand off there, so their hand burns. They smash it in doors, they fall down, and all kinds of things happen to their extremities. And since there's no pain receptors in those extremities, not a problem. But there is a problem because they break things and things get smashed, and so it's a problem. But
Yeah, if you walk around on a broken foot, it's gonna.
but if you can walk on glass, for instance, and there be no pain receptors in your feet.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let us stand, please, for the Elenu on page 95. Page 95 for the traditional Elenu. Join with me. Elenu l'shabbat kle'adon ha.